Okay, so if you ever like walked into a place and it's completely packed and you just figure it's got to be good, right?
It's happened to all of us, I think.
What happened to me the other day, and let me tell you,
Uh-huh.
total disaster. But it got me thinking about like why we do that.
Mm.
You know, why do we put so much stock in what other people are doing? Like with investing or even just like trying out a new tech gadget everyone's talking about.
Right. Well, when you're uncertain what to do, seeing a bunch of other people doing something, it's like they've got some inside information. At least that's how our brains seem to process it.
That's so interesting. So today we're doing a deep dive into this whole idea of information cascades
Hmm.
and herding behavior too. We're going to be using Christoph P. Chanley's book, Rational Herds, to help guide our exploration.
Great book.
Have you read it?
Cover to cover. Chanley's insights into how these things work are just fascinating.
So let's jump right in. So information cascades. It's like our brains are saying, hey, everyone's doing it, so it must be good, even if it turns out to be a terrible restaurant.
Yeah, exactly. It all goes back to this idea of social learning.
Hmm.
We're hardwired to learn from each other's actions, especially when we're in unfamiliar territory. But this can backfire sometimes.
Oh, totally.
And that's when you get these information cascades. Think about like a line forming outside a store.
Okay.
The first few people there, they might have some inside scoop, or maybe they just like to get there early. But everyone who comes after sees that line and thinks something must be going on here.
Right.
So they join the line too, even if they have no idea what they're waiting for.
Wow. So you're saying my bad restaurant experience wasn't just bad luck. It was like a whole chain reaction of decisions that started who knows where.
It's totally possible.
That is both really cool and kind of scary at the same time.
It's both. And here's the thing. Chanley argues that these cascades, they can gain momentum even if the initial decisions were like totally off base.
Really?
Yeah. Think of it this way. We all have like our own private information, our own experiences,
Yeah.
but then we also see the choices other people have made.
Right.
And sometimes that public information can actually override our own judgment, even if it's wrong.
Huh.
That's how these cascades happen.
Wow. Okay, so this is already blowing my mind. But I want to understand this even better. Chamley connects these information cascades to something he calls Bayesian learning. You explain what that is in like plain English?
Sure. Bayesian learning basically means we don't just accept new information at face value, we weigh it against what we already know. And we factor in like the base rates of things.
Base rate.
Yeah, like how common or rare something is.
Okay, got it.
So imagine a witness claims they saw a red car involved in some kind of accident.
Okay, I'm imagining.
The witness seems credible. But let's say you know that red cars are like super rare in this city.
Oh, that changes things.
Right. So how much weight would you give to that witness's statement then?
That's tricky. I mean, you'd want to believe the witness, but knowing that red cars are so rare, I'd have to at least question it,
Exactly. And that right there, that's Bayesian learning in action.
So it's like my brain is constantly trying to update its understanding of the world based on new information and what I already know. But then how does this all tie back into those information cascades?
It's all about how we interpret information within a cascade. Because in those situations, we tend to overemphasize the actions of others, that public information like a long line or a crowded restaurant, and we underemphasize our own judgment, the private information like knowing most cars aren't red or that other restaurants are pretty empty.
Oh, I see. So with my restaurant fiasco, I overemphasize the crowd and underemphasize my own research. Or even just like common sense.
Exactly. You got it.
Wow, it's like my brain decided to ignore those super important details.
And that's what Chamley's getting at. Understanding this tendency to overemphasize public information, especially when you're caught in one of these cascades, well, it can be the key to avoiding those situations where you end up with a bad meal and a heaping plate of regret.
Oh, tell me about it. It's already making me think twice about just following the crowd.
Yeah.
But Chamley doesn't just stop at restaurants, does he?
No, he doesn't.
He takes these ideas and applies them to like bigger, more complex systems, like the stock market.
Exactly. Rational herds looks at how these dynamics play out in all sorts of different situations. Financial markets are a really interesting example.
Okay, so let's talk stock market bubbles then.
Yeah.
They always seem to start with just like a whisper. And then suddenly everyone's caught up in this frenzy.
They do.
And then just as quickly as it started, it's over. People are left wondering what hit them.
Yep, sounds about right.
So how do information cascades play into these stock market bubbles?
Well, imagine a few investors get some kind of tip about a particular stock.
Okay.
Maybe they hear about some new trend that's going to make this company huge, so they
Yeah.
start buying. And that buying drives the price up.
Right.
Now, other investors see this happening, and they don't want to miss out.
Classic FOMO.
Exactly. They might not know anything about the company or the supposed trend, but they see the price going up, and they jump on board.
Just to avoid that feeling of being left behind.
That's a big part of it.
So it becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Right.
The rising price, which is being driven by those initial investors, it becomes the main evidence for others to invest, even if nothing about the company itself has actually changed.
Precisely. You got it. And this is what Chamley highlights in the book. These bubbles can keep going, even when investors know deep down that the price is way too high, like it can't last, but they're trapped in this cascade of buying.
They're afraid to swim against the current.
Exactly. It's the fear of missing out that keeps them holding on.
It's wild when you think about it. These huge market swings, all because of FOMO.
And it all comes back to how we interpret information.
Yeah.
And how our decisions are influenced by what everyone else is doing.
That is so interesting. So it's not that we're all just irrational, right?
No, not at all.
These cascades, it's not about individuals being irrational. It's about rational individuals operating within a system where information is imperfect
Precisely.
and actions are interdependent. And that system itself can lead to these situations.
That's one of Chamley's key points. These cascades, they're not about people being irrational. It's about rational individuals making what they think are the best decisions with the information they have, but within a system that can sometimes create these wild swings and bubbles.
So we're not all just like sheep blindly following a shepherd. There's way more to it than that.
Exactly. It's much more nuanced than that. Chamley's work shows that social learning, while often beneficial, it can sometimes lead us down the wrong path.
Totally.
And it's about recognizing these cascades, understanding when we're most vulnerable to them. Right. And learning how to think for ourselves, even when everyone else seems to be moving in a different direction.
That's like having the courage to be the salmon swimming upstream.
Exactly.
I love it.
Yeah.
So what can we do about it? Are we destined to always be at the mercy of these information cascades?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is. I mean, surely Chamley wouldn't leave us hanging without any tools to navigate these tricky situations.
He wouldn't dream of it. He actually gives us some really practical advice on how to break free from the herd mentality and become more independent thinkers.
Okay, I am so ready for this. What's step one?
Step one is self-awareness. We need to recognize that we're all susceptible to social influence.
All of us.
Every single one of us.
I mean you.
Especially me. It's not a weakness or anything. It's just part of what makes us human.
Right.
We're social creatures. We're wired to connect with others. And that includes being influenced by them.
It's like that saying, the first step is admitting you have a problem.
Exactly.
We have to acknowledge our own biases
Yes.
before we can even start to address them.
You got it.
Okay, so we've had our moment of self-reflection. We've acknowledged that, yeah, we might be influenced by the crowd, even when we think we're being totally rational. Where do we go from there?
Well, once you've acknowledged your susceptibility, one of the best things you can do is actively seek out diverse perspectives.
Diverse perspectives.
Yeah, we tend to surround ourselves with people who think like us.
That's true.
Especially online. We end up in these echo chambers where our existing beliefs are just constantly reinforced.
Right, it's so easy to fall into that trap.
It is. But to break free from that, you have to actively seek out different viewpoints.
Okay, so how do we do that?
Talk to people from different backgrounds.
Oh, okay.
Read news from sources you wouldn't normally go to. Expose yourself to a wider range of ideas and opinions.
Even if they make us uncomfortable.
Especially if they make you uncomfortable. It's about getting a more complete picture of the situation, understanding the different forces at play, and then making your own judgments based on a more holistic understanding.
So it's not about being contrarian just for the sake of it.
No, not at all.
It's about gathering as much information as possible from diverse sources. And then using our own critical thinking skills to navigate that information landscape.
Exactly.
I love that.
And speaking of critical thinking, that's another key step.
Okay, tell me more.
Don't just accept information at face value, even if it's coming from a source you usually trust.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah, you got to ask yourself some questions. Where did this information come from?
Okay.
Who benefits from me believing this? Are there other explanations or perspectives that I'm not considering?
It's like being a detective, right?
Exactly.
You're looking for clues questioning motives, trying to piece together different pieces of evidence
It's a great analogy.
to find the truth.
That's the goal.
I love that. So we have to approach information with that same level of scrutiny.
You got it.
Okay, so self-awareness, diverse perspectives, critical thinking. Anything else?
One more thing. And this one can be tough
Okay, hit me.
sometimes. The hardest thing to do, but also the most rewarding, is to go against the grain.
Ooh, I like where this is going.
Trust your own judgment, even when everyone else seems to be telling you you're wrong.
So everyone's running one way, but your gut is telling you to go the other way. Maybe, just maybe, your gut is onto something.
It's not always easy, but some of the most successful people in history are the ones who are willing to challenge the status quo,
Right.
think differently, and forge their own path, even when everyone else thought they were crazy.
Right, like all the great innovators and artists and thinkers.
Mm.
It's a good reminder that independent thinking doesn't always mean being right, but it does mean being true to your own assessment of the situation,
Absolutely.
even when it's uncomfortable or goes against the popular opinion.
It takes courage to go against the grain,
It does.
but sometimes it's the only way to find your own truth.
I love that. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, but Chamley leaves us with one final and quite intriguing concept to consider. This idea of unbounded beliefs.
Ah, yes. Unbounded beliefs.
Now, that sounds almost counterintuitive, because if we're trying to break free from the herd, wouldn't having strong beliefs, even if they're unconventional, wouldn't that make us more likely to dig in our heels and become inflexible? How can having unbounded beliefs actually lead to better decision-making?
That's a great question, and it gets to the heart of what Chamley is trying to convey, because having unbounded beliefs, it's not about being indifferent or lacking conviction. It's about constantly challenging your own assumptions, being open to new information, and recognizing that our current understanding of the world is always incomplete.
So it's more about cultivating intellectual humility
Exactly.
than clinging to rigid beliefs.
Yes.
Even if those beliefs go against the mainstream.
Precisely. Unbounded beliefs are about embracing intellectual curiosity,
I like that.
constantly seeking out new information and diverse perspectives, and being willing to update your beliefs as new evidence emerges.
It's like that quote, often attributed to John Maynard Keynes. When the facts change, I change my mind. What do you do, sir?
Exactly.
Right.
That's the essence of unbounded beliefs. It's not about being indecisive. It's about being adaptable,
Yep.
intellectually agile, and open to the possibility that you might be wrong.
Wow. That is a really powerful concept, especially in today's world where we're just bombarded with information from all sides.
It is.
It's so easy to get stuck in our own echo chambers.
Uh,
But Chamley's work reminds us that true understanding requires stepping outside of those comfortable spaces
yes.
and engaging with different, even opposing viewpoints.
Exactly. It's about embracing the unknown.
I think that's a great takeaway.
It is. Chamley's work isn't about telling us what to think. It's about giving us the tools to think for ourselves.
Yes.
To navigate this complex world with a more critical and discerning eye. He's reminding us that we're not just passive recipients of information. We have the agency to shape our beliefs and make choices, even amidst the powerful forces of social influence.
It's a message that's both empowering and humbling, isn't
That
it?
is.
Empowering because it reminds us that we have more agency than we might realize, but also humbling because it forces us to confront our own biases and the limitations of our own perspectives.
Absolutely. It's a call to be more conscious, more critical, and more deliberate in how we navigate the world and how we allow information to shape our understanding of it.
This has been fascinating, a real eye-opener. So we've been talking about social learning, information cascades, and these often surprising ways that our decisions are shaped by the forces of the herd. A huge thanks to Christoph Chamley for his incredible work in Rational Herds, which has provided the framework for our deep dive today.
Such a good book.
And to you, our listeners, I want to leave you with this. The next time you're about to follow the crowd, take a moment to ask yourself, am I thinking for myself, or am I just following the herd?
You might be surprised by what you discover. It's like that awareness gives us a little bit of distance. You know,
Absolutely.
Like we can see the current, but we don't have to get swept away by it.
Exactly.
So Chimley, he doesn't just stop at like restaurants and stock markets, right?
It is even deeper.
He also uses currency markets as an example.
Yeah, he talks about how these dynamics play out with things like speculative attacks on currencies.
Okay, speculative attacks. That sounds intense.
It is.
So for those of us who don't spend our days trading currencies, can you break down what that actually looks like?
Sure. So imagine a country, And they have a fixed exchange rate for their currency.
Meaning their currency is tied to something like the US dollar. It's meant to create stability.
Right, so their currency moves in sync with the dollar.
Exactly. But then let's say some investors, they start having doubts.
Oh, no.
Maybe they see some signs of economic weakness.
Like a recession?
Could be. Or maybe there's political instability.
Protests.
Something like that. And they start to worry that the country might have to devalue their currency.
Meaning it would be worth less compared to the dollar.
Exactly. So what do these investors do?
They start selling off that country's currency, like betting that it's going to drop.
Exactly. And it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Wow.
The more investors sell off the currency because they think it's going to drop,
The more it actually drops.
exactly. It's crazy,
Yeah.
right?
So even if that country's government, even if they were trying to maintain that fixed exchange rate,
Yeah.
the market itself can force their hand.
Happens all the time.
That is a really powerful illustration of how these cascades, it's not just about individual rationality.
Right.
It's about how individuals acting rationally
Yeah.
can create outcomes that are actually detrimental to the whole.
It's a classic example of what can happen when you have a system that's vulnerable to these kinds of feedback loops.
And this is happening with something as seemingly stable and established as a currency.
It just goes to show you how powerful these forces can be.
Sobering stuff. Okay, so we've talked about how to break free from the herd mentality by cultivating self-awareness, seeking out diverse perspectives, thinking critically about information, and even having the courage to go against the grain when it feels right. But what about this idea of unbounded beliefs? How does that fit into all of this?
Well, unbounded beliefs, it's not about not having any beliefs or just being wishy-washy.
Okay.
It's about recognizing that our understanding of the world is always evolving.
So it's more about being open to new information.
Yes.
And being willing to update our beliefs as we learn more.
Exactly. It's about embracing intellectual humility.
Exactly.
It's about being willing to say, hey, I might be wrong about this, and that's okay.
It's like that famous quote, the only constant is change.
I love that.
Except in this case, it's the only constant is changing your mind.
Right. Because the more we learn, the more we realize we don't know.
So true. This has been an incredible conversation.
It has.
We've covered so much ground today. From those crazy information cascades that lead us to crowded restaurants, to the wild world of stock market bubbles, and even speculative attacks on currencies.
It's amazing how these dynamics play out in so many different areas of life.
It is. But what's really powerful about Chamley's work is that it's not all doom and gloom.
Right.
He doesn't just point out these problems. He gives us practical tools to navigate them.
Exactly. He empowers us to become more independent thinkers.
And to break free from the herd mentality.
Which is more important now than ever.
Absolutely.
Oh.
So to wrap things up, I want to give a huge shout out to Christoph Chamley for his brilliant book, Rational Herds. It's been an amazing guide for our deep dive today.
Such a great book.
And to all of you listening, remember, the next time you feel that pull to follow the crowd, take a deep breath and ask yourself, is this really what I want, or am I just letting the herd do my thinking for me? The answer might surprise you. Until next time, keep those minds curious and those perspectives open.